Our Bible reading this week is in John chapter 10. If you want to grab your Bible and head over that text as we continue to work our way through the Gospel of John in the back end of 2025. John 10 is one of these familiar texts, I think. We have two I am statements. I don't think we've talked about the I am statements.
I don't think we have either, actually.
In the book of John. But,
I don't think we have either.
Just as John has a collection of miracles that sort of run through it, there are also a set of declarations that Jesus makes about who he is and what he has come to do. And there are 7 of those sort of loosely identified as such.
Yeah.
And this chapter contains 2 of them, which is interestingly sort of a blending of metaphors here in the text. Probably the more familiar of the 2 is that Jesus is going to say in verse 11, I am the good shepherd.
Yep.
But before that, in verse 7, he says, I am the door of the sheep. And so I guess if we're going to talk about John 10, we need to talk a little about shepherds.
Lots of sheep in here.
Yeah, which is unfamiliar to us.
Yeah.
Especially for me and you because we're city boys.
Right.
Yeah, I told my class on Sunday that none of the agricultural cattle kind of stuff registers with me at all. But to those people, these scenes would have all been very, very familiar. So shepherds would have kept sheep.
Right.
And then the sheepfold, which is alluded to here early on, would be the place in the field where they would keep them at night, sort of an enclosure, some kind of stone.
Yeah. We don't also appreciate how dark it was in the ancient world at night. And so for predators picking off sheep or people stealing sheep. No flashlights, man.
So yes, that was a problem. And so they would have these enclosures.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's just twisted branches or stones or whatever. And all the sheep would go into this, sometimes multiple flocks by several different shepherds. And there would be an opening, and the shepherd would literally lay down in front of the opening to keep any thieves or predators from getting in and getting the sheep. And so that's at play here in John chapter 10.
Yeah, well, to your point, the whole thing is got the shepherding motif going on, and it's not just in the sense either that it's a big part. Agriculture is a big part of their world. The Bible, it's not just here in John's gospel. The Bible obviously has used shepherding language.
All the way through.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. One of the most familiar bits of scripture, even for those who aren't particularly religious. Probably heard Psalm 23. So, so part of what's really important to really appreciate what Jesus is doing by invoking so much shepherd and shepherding language here is Ezekiel chapter 34, where in the context of the exile, right? Ezekiel's a prophet of the exile, the fall of Jerusalem, and that early part of captivity. Though, like other prophets of the exile, he sees beyond it. And Ezekiel 34, and you can read that as well this week if you really want to get a sense of what's underneath what Jesus is saying, especially when he goes to the next I am the good shepherd. All of this relates to the fact that God, in the context of the destruction of Jerusalem, the temple, his people going into exile, his sheep being scattered, puts part of the responsibility, certainly the people were sinful, but puts part of the responsibility on the poor shepherd. Shepherd was actually a common bit of language in the ancient world in general, even among pagans. Ancient Near Eastern kings would depict themselves as shepherds of their people. And so it was a very common image for leadership in the ancient world anyways, besides being agriculturally familiar. And so God in Ezekiel very much, and does this in Jeremiah too for that matter, but in Ezekiel, part of why my flock has fallen such hard times and been scattered is the failure of the shepherds. And so in Ezekiel 34, kind of coming out of the exile or anticipating beyond the exile, God basically says, I've had it with human shepherds. I will be the shepherd. And of course, now when Jesus shows up saying, I am the good shepherd, he's literally saying, I'm the shepherd of Ezekiel 34. If you go back and read what he says here, go back and read Ezekiel 34, you'll see the echoes, the resonances, the allusions. Jesus is basically saying, I am, that's why the I am statement becomes again another form of his asserting his deity. Because the good shepherd, the shepherd of Ezekiel 34 is ultimately God himself, who is going to regather his sheep and be the shepherd, the leader that they always needed. And so that sits underneath all of this as well. It's not just the agricultural image of, we're sheep, we're kind of hopeless and helpless and need strong leadership or else we just kind of wander off and die, get lost or get eaten. But God himself, in the form of Jesus of Nazareth, is now being revealed, is going to be the shepherd that the people desperately need.
Okay, so before he says that, he describes himself as the door
Yeah.
or the access
Yeah.
to the fold. And so,
Yeah.
and so his first, again, he plays with both of the figures through here,
Correct.
and both of them are relevant to this shepherding
Correct.
idea because the fold is where the sheep would retreat for safety and protection for the
Right.
shepherd at night.
Right.
And so, what he's saying is that your access to the fold of God is through me. I am the door.
Well, that's certainly part of the, especially I am the the door to the sheep, but also protection, because that's the one place where a predator or something else could get in. And so, because he'll play that especially as well, he says, "I am the good shepherd," because what is the shepherd doing when he's literally lying down in the doorway? He is the ultimate defense between the sheep and the predator. And so that's his whole point. And as he goes on, when he says, coming out of this, I'm the door, but I'm also the good shepherd, because I'm going to, my sheep know me, I know the Father, and I lay my life down. I mean, that's the whole thing. At the end of the day, it's going to be a defensive position. The shepherd's job is to protect the sheep from the wolves that do come, and lesser shepherds may not be willing to do that. The hirelings won't risk their lives against the mountain lions and the fairly serious predators that could come. But if they are your sheep and this is your livelihood, you will absolutely risk yourself to protect what's yours.
Well, in 9, if anyone enters through me,
right,
he will be saved,
right,
and he will go in and out,
right,
and he will find pasture.
right.
So it's access, it's, as you said, protection, because right before that in 8, it's the thieves and robbers that they're concerned about, and nourishment. There will be nourishment there. I will provide for you, and I will take care of you. But it really is an audacious claim. I think we tend to look at this and we just say, "Oh, that's so nice. God takes care of his sheep, and Jesus lets us in." But
well, and agriculture was a lot more brutal and bloody back then too. We just
Yes, well,
there's a reason we put these kind of caricatured lambs on our kids' nurseries when they're babies. But this is nature red in tooth and claw. I mean, that's the whole point. Literally, we're talking about protecting sheep from predators. It is a bloody and violent business sometimes.
Yes, and I think sometimes that we don't appreciate reading it through the lens of those people at those times. We look back on this already knowing who Jesus was.
Right.
And they're just processing this as they hear him saying these things, which is why there's often division. In fact, that's what you have here. If you look at 19, 20, and 21, a division occurred among the Jews because of these words. Many of them were saying, he has a demon, as in saying, why are you listening to him? But then there's the pushback. Others were saying, these are not the sayings of one who is demon-possessed. And 2, a demon cannot open the eyes of the blind, can he? Maybe thinking back to 9.
Correct.
And so you have this debate going on, and some are trying to dismiss him as a bad guy. And the reverse argument is, well, but wait, he doesn't sound like a bad guy.
Right.
He doesn't teach like a bad guy.
Yeah, his signs aren't a bad guy's signs.
And a bad guy can't do this.
Right.
And so what you have is the claims and works of Jesus become this limiting principle. There's just some things you can't say about him if he is teaching like he's teaching and doing what he's doing, working these miracles.
But part of why this wasn't just complete, why it troubled them so much was, I think they, again, the resonances with Old Testament prophecy and expectation. He's claiming something bigger than just a simple metaphor, and I think some of them got it, which is why they were troubled.
The shepherd figure, the second one, he uses the metaphor of the door and then of the shepherd. There are some beautiful ideas here. I know my sheep know me, my sheep hear my voice. One thing I like about that is, and I didn't know this since I'm a city boy, but they would keep multiple flocks in these folds, and each shepherd would come one by one and call their flock out.
Sure.
And only their sheep would come out.
Sure.
And then the next shepherd would come and call his sheep, and only his sheep would come out because he knows them and they know his voice.
Right.
And I think that is a beautiful figure of our relationship with Jesus. I think the closer and closer we get to him, we learn to recognize what is his voice, what is his teaching. And the better you do that, the more you're able to recognize what isn't from him. Right. Which that discerning ability is just so desperately needed in our world today.
Yep.
Okay, so pushing on through the rest of this chapter, some important claims are made down through here. I lay down my life for my sheep,
Right.
pointing to the ultimate sacrifice.
Right. And again, we kind of see shepherding as a nostalgic and peaceful and pastoral, but it was a danger. It could be potentially be a dangerous job in the ancient world. And so yeah, he's absolutely prepared to sacrifice himself for the well-being of his sheep. And again, in distinction from the previous kinds of shepherds Israel had in Ezekiel, where God is saying, I'm done with these kind of guys. I'll do it.
So pushing later, there's actually a controversial text here.
Oh yeah, especially get later into John. This is how John has the tension rising. Depicts the tension rising. There's going to have to be rocks in people's hands before the chapter's over.
Well, yeah. One of the things is, though, 28 and 29, some believe that they see Calvinism there, that nobody can snatch the sheep out of the Father's hand.
Right.
And they believe they see there the idea of eternal security.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's just, first of all, we get this with other places in John's language. John uses relatively simple language for profound thoughts, which is why you can't just read John on the surface. Sometimes you have to stop and ponder for a while what he's saying or what he's recording being said. John's tone, John's words, and the things that John cites from the Jesus story are unique and different. And so, yeah, there's a difference in saying nobody can take you out of the Father's hand and you can't get yourself out of the Father's hand.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If nobody can snatch me away, they can't take me against my will. But
you're right. So go back to the larger context here. I'm the good shepherd. This is the shepherd who can absolutely, and the whole angle of defense here, right? I'm the door to the sheep. If you're being defended by Jesus, Satan can't get you. False teachers can't get you. Whatever. Even death ultimately can't get you. In that sense, no third party can overpower God, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and rob you of your security, rob you of your salvation that you have there. You can leave.
You could leave the shepherd.
You can leave
the shepherd's protection.
So it's meant to be reassuring, but not in the in the Calvinist way. It's meant to be reassuring that it's a form of Romans 8. There is no if God is for us, who can be against us? I mean, it's a Jesus's version of Romans 8.
Yep.
Nothing can separate you from the love of God. You can separate yourself from the love of God.
Okay, so 30 is pretty controversial because now you have one of these moments where they're ready to kill him, when he's ready to kill him, when he says, I and the Father are one.
Yep.
And they picked up stones to stone him. And so why? What they get so worked up about that?
Well, it's another claim, the explicit claim to deity. It's not even kind of vague and we just think he's nuts or he has a demon. It's if he's wrong, it's blasphemy.
Yeah, it's more than just, hey, we're together on this.
No, that's right.
It's a claim of oneness with the Father. And that's what they say in 33. You make yourself out to be God.
Yeah, that's right. Before Abraham was I am back in chapter 8. Now here he is saying I and the Father are one. And so that's the thing is, unlike the synoptic gospels, which more slowly reveal Jesus, and who do men say that I am, and even the disciples are confused, and then Mark's gospel especially telling people don't tell who I am because he wants, he understands misunderstands things. John's gospel focuses more on we know who he is from the beginning, and even when you know who he is from the beginning, and there's no real mystery, the heart of human rebellion is revealed in the adamancy in which we refuse to accept the signs for what they obviously are. It's not a demon. He's not a blasphemer. He is God because nobody but God or somebody who's with God could do this.
Which is why in 37 and 38, I love these two verses because it shows you how Jesus is willing to put it all on the table, right?
Right.
If I don't do the works of the Father, don't believe me.
Right.
I can't just run around making claims.
Right.
I got to have some kind of evidence to back this up. And then he goes on to say, if you don't believe me, believe the works.
Yeah.
The signs, that language, sign, carries the idea that there's a message behind it. The sign is supposed to be telling you something.
Right.
There's something here for you to read and notice and conclude. And I think that's what he says in 38 is, look at what the sign is telling you.
Yeah.
And believe the message that is wrapped up in the sign, in the miracle.
Right.
And of course, they're struggling. They're struggling to do that. But Jesus didn't run around just expecting people to embrace this. I think we have sort of a backward view of people at that time, or maybe our view of them is that they're backward and they weren't able to discern and know, and they're just being taken in by a con man.
Right.
When we see exactly the opposite here, the demand for evidence, Jesus' insistence that he had to provide evidence that would verify his claims are true.
Right.
And he's quite open about that.
And so to that end, David, maybe in one way, especially because we're almost halfway through John's gospel now, to kind of really drive home, one of the big picture takeaways that you're getting from John's gospel is if the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke are more, kind of slowly revealing who Jesus is, and the struggle is Jesus slowly reveals who he is. John's gospel does the opposite. In other words, if the mystery is who is Jesus really in the synoptics, as he slowly revealed, John's the opposite. John shows you flat out, this is who Jesus is. And so the real revelation in John's gospel is who Jesus is. The real revelation in John's gospel is what man is. In other words, when you're confronted point blank with God in flesh, fulfillment of prophecy, signs being worked. And so you think about, whether it's John chapter 1. John's actually been setting this up now. Go back and think about how John's gospel uniquely opens. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. Chapter 2, Jesus knew what was in man and was not trusting himself to them. John chapter 3, Jesus flat out says, the reason that people don't come into the light is because their deeds are dark and they love darkness more than light. They love darkness more than light.
That whole light and dark metaphor all the way through.
And so what you're getting in John's gospel is it's not Jesus who's being revealed, it's human beings are being revealed in our ugliness, the depths of our determination to rebel. Because we're on the cusp next week, chapter 11.
Yes.
In John's gospel, short of Jesus' own resurrection, the biggest sign of all, power of life and death. And that only further cements, especially the Jewish leadership's determination to kill kill Jesus and Lazarus.
It shows you how committed we can be to believing a certain thing to the point that we close our eyes
We're blind.
to all evidence to the contrary.
Right.
And I think that we always need to be open to hear truth that is in conflict with what it is that we believe. And I think that is a great lesson for parents to talk to their kids about.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be so open-minded that my brain falls out.
Right.
But I don't want to be so close-minded
Right.
that I can't be persuaded by reason and logic and truth from what is in the Word of God. And one of the, as we get into chapter 11, we're just going to see how hardened people become in their desire not to see what they don't want to see. And I just think we have to be sensitive to that danger.
And to that point, I think what we teach our kids is if the only reason you aren't believing in something you can intellectually see is true is because you don't want to, then you're in a really dangerous place because that's where hardening of heart concretely begins to happen. Yeah. When I can't give any evidence against the truth, I can see intellectually, mentally, rationally it is the truth. The reason I'm not following it, believing it, accepting it, obeying it is because I don't want it to be true. I wish it weren't true. Right. That's a really spiritually dangerous place to be because now I'm making an intentional decision to go against what my eyes can see and my mind can understand.
Yep. All right. A lot to think about in John 10. It is a rich chapter. We hope you enjoy your read there this week.